While looking through the top 10 career passer ratings in NFL history, I stumbled across many first-round players, such as Aaron Rodgers, Steve Young, Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, but right in the middle at number 5 all time stood Tony Romo. Many don't know that Tony Romo went undrafted, and 13 quarterbacks were drafted before him. Today I'm going to be talking about those 13 quarterbacks, and if those teams made a mistake. Spoiler alert, almost all of them did.
Coming out of Eastern Illinois, Romo threw for 7,800 yards and 82 touchdowns and only 34 interceptions. He initially didn't get invited to the 2003 Combine, but later attended to throw passes for the receiver drills. During the draft process, the Cowboys coaching staff had reached out to him and assured him that if he went undrafted, they would look into picking him up, which they later did in 2003. During 2003, 2004, and 2005, he would serve as the third string and backup, and also the starting kick holder, which is pretty cool because he was the last quarterback to hold kicks before punters started holding them. And in 2006, he would become the starter and never look back. Romo was a 4-time Pro Bowler. He finished second-team All-Pro in 2014, led the NFC in passing yards in 2009, led them in passing touchdowns in 2007, was the passer rating leader in 2014, completion percentage leader in 2014, 2-time NFC passer rating leader, and owns the record for highest QB rating in the fourth quarter, which is quite impressive. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the Dallas Cowboys, who are one of the most legendary teams in NFL history, and have had some pretty great quarterbacks in Troy Aikman, Roger Staubach, to name a few. And after retiring, he would go on to become one of the best NFL commentators that we've ever seen, in my opinion. And I really enjoy watching games he commentates, as he has a really good knowledge of the game. And you can really tell from how he's talking before the snaps, and just the insight he gives on the games.
With the first overall pick in the 2003 draft, the Cincinnati Bengals selected Carson Palmer out of USC. Palmer is the only quarterback in the 2003 draft that I think is comparable to Tony Romo statistically. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler and was the AFC Offensive Player of the Year in 2005. Coming out of college, he was heavily decorated, having thrown for 11,000 yards and 72 touchdowns at one of the biggest universities in the United States. He won the Heisman in 2002 and was the consensus #1 quarterback and player in the 2003 draft. Over his career, Carson Palmer owns many records for both the Cincinnati Bengals and the Arizona Cardinals. He started his career strong, throwing for 2,800 yards, 3,800 yards, and 4,000 yards in his first 3 seasons. He continued at a good pace until he was traded to the Raiders in 2011. He had 2 decent seasons in Oakland, but he really revived his career with the Arizona Cardinals and Bruce Arians as his coach. He threw for a career-high 4,600 yards and 35 touchdowns in the 2015 season. He retired after the 2015 season due to injuries he suffered that year, and his 46,000 passing yards over his career are good for 13th all-time. He also threw for 294 touchdowns. Overall, I don't think the Bengals regret drafting Palmer with the first overall pick, and it wouldn't be a stretch to say he had a better career than Romo. With the 7th overall pick in the 2003 draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars selected Byron Leftwich out of Marshall University. Leftwich started his college career quite underrated. However, he was pushed into a national spotlight after leading his team to a 17-point comeback with a broken bone in his foot. He finished second all-time in career passing yards for Marshall with 12,000 yards. And the Jaguars traded up from pick 8 to pick 7 to draft Leftwich, as many other teams had the idea of drafting him. Leftwich had an underwhelming career, to say the least. This is both a combination of injuries and lack of production. His first 3 years were quite good, throwing for more than 2,000 yards and having pretty solid touchdown-interception ratio other than his rookie season. However, he couldn't stay on the field, having only started 13 games in his first season, 14 in his second, and 11 in his third. The injuries really hit him in 2006, where he only started 3 games before injuring his ankle and being replaced by David Gerard, who played quite well in his absence. Leftwich would not return to the Jaguars after 2006 and would have a short stint with the Atlanta Falcons, Pittsburgh Steelers, where he won a ring, Tampa Bay, and then he went back to Pittsburgh for the final 2 seasons of his career. After retiring, Leftwich has now joined the Arizona Cardinals coaching staff and was promoted to to offensive coordinator this season. With the 19th overall pick in the 2003 draft, the Baltimore Ravens selected Kyle Baller out of the University of California, Berkeley. In his first 3 seasons at Cal, Baller was nothing special. However, in his fourth and final season, he threw for 2,800 yards and 28 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions, which shot him up teams' draft boards. He finished 3rd all-time for career passing yards and 2nd all-time for career touchdown passes at the University of California. Baller started the first 9 games of his career, going 5-3. However, a thigh injury kept him out for the rest of the season. After that, his career started spiraling downhill. 2004, threw for 2,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, with 7 fumbles. It was ridiculous. 2005, he threw for 1,700 yards, 11 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and 6 fumbles, in only 9 games, which is another issue. He was injury prone. In only 5 games in 2006, he threw for 480 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. 2007, he threw for 1,700 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, with 5 fumbles. That would be his last year in Baltimore. He then missed the 2008 season and signed with the Rams in the 2009 season, where he played in 7 uneventful games. He finished his career with the Oakland Raiders. Overall, his combination of injuries and being extremely turnover prone hurt his career. Looking back at it, Tony Romo would have been a pretty good quarterback for the Ravens. They had a once-in-a-generation defense who had already won a Super Bowl in 2000, and with a less talented quarterback in Trent Dilfer. And Romo would have done just enough to help them win games. Baller played decently for them sometimes, but he's extremely inconsistent and turned over the ball way too much. It's also kind of funny that he joined the team after they won a Super Bowl, and after retiring, they won a Super Bowl a few years later. So you could say he was holding the team back over those years. However, who knows? The final quarterback selected in the first round is Rex Grossman to the Chicago Bears. Grossman was impressive at Florida, racking up 1,800 yards and 21 touchdowns as a freshman, 3,800 yards and 34 touchdowns as a sophomore, and 3,400 yards and 22 touchdowns as a junior. He was the Heisman Trophy runner-up in 2001 and also the SEC Player of the Year that same year. Coming out of college, he was also seen as pretty undersized for the position, being 6 foot, 225 pounds. However, the Bears decided to draft him in the first round. Grossman struggled with injuries mightily through his first 3 seasons, only starting 3 games in each of his first 2 seasons, and only 1 in his 3rd season. In his 4th season, you could say he broke out, having thrown for 3,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions, and being the starting quarterback on a Bears team who went on to lose in the Super Bowl to Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts. However, the Bears making it to the Super Bowl were more in part to that legendary defense than with Grossman playing quarterback. However, people like to look back at it and think that Grossman was a good quarterback, which he really wasn't. After the 2006 season, Grossman quickly fell off, throwing for 1,411 yards in 7 games and 4 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. In his final season with Chicago in 2008, he only started 1 game, throwing for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns, before they picked up Jay Cutler to replace him. He joined the Texans in 2009 and didn't do much, and then finished his career with Washington, starting 13 games in his final season and throwing for 3,100 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions, which was pretty decent for his final season. However, he would retire after that. Similarly to the Baltimore Ravens, you can make the argument that Rex Grossman held back those Chicago Bears teams with such a talented defense. They definitely would have drafted Romo in a redraft. And looking back at it, the Chicago Bears have a similar situation now, with Mitchell Trubisky, who's been average to start his career despite making a Pro Bowl, and a very talented defense with generational talents like Khalil Mack. Hopefully,
Mitchell Trubisky is their quarterback, though, and they can win a Super Bowl. With the 88th overall pick in the third round, the Houston Texans selected Dave Ragone out of the University of Louisville. Ragone won the Offensive Player of the Year in the Conference USA 3 times and went 27-11 as their starting quarterback over his career. After being selected by the Texans in 2003, he rode the bench for 2 years before being sent to NFL Europe, where he won Offensive MVP. He was then released by the Texans and played for the Bengals and Rams practice squads. The Texans made a pretty big mistake drafting him and could have used Romo, seeing as how they had one of the most talented receivers of this generation, Andre Johnson. Ragone is now the quarterback's coach in Chicago, and hopefully he can be a better coach than he was an NFL player, because he was pretty bad in the NFL. You guys want to hear his stats? 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, 135 yards, and a 47.4 passer rating. Awful. With the 97th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected Chris Sims, who ironically is the son of Phil Simms, who Tony Romo replaced as a commentator for CBS last year. Sims led Tampa Bay to a playoff appearance in 2005, however he didn't do much after that and just became a career backup. Sims is now an analyst for Bleacher Report and is heavily criticized for his stupid takes. With the 110th overall pick in the 4th round, the Seahawks selected dual threat quarterback Seneca Wallace out of Iowa State. Wallace's draft stock dropped as most teams saw him as a wide receiver or running back, whereas he wanted to play quarterback. The Seahawks would eventually convert him to receiver, where he was decent, and he also played quarterback 1 year after quarterback Matt Hasselbeck got injured. Overall, his career was quite underwhelming, and he went on to play for the Browns and the Saints as well. I wouldn't criticize the Seahawks, as I don't think they had any intention of drafting Wallace as a quarterback. However, he did play quite a few games at quarterback, and Romo obviously was significantly better. With the 163rd pick in the 5th round, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected quarterback Brian St. Pierre out of Boston College. St. Pierre would spend most of his career as a third string or a backup and threw for 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 185 yards. He is now a high school football coach in Massachusetts. With the 192nd overall pick in the 2003 draft, the Houston Texans once again selected a quarterback in Drew Henson. However, he would never play a game for them. Coming out of Michigan, Henson was a pretty talented baseball player and would play in the minors for a few years before his rights were traded to the Dallas Cowboys, and he would sign with them in 2004. Henson was a career backup and was also the backup on the 0-16 Lions, which says about enough for what you need to know about his career. Okay, so this next one's pretty funny. With the 200th pick in the 6th round, the New York Jets selected Brooks Bollinger out of Wisconsin. Bollinger was a pretty good quarterback at Wisconsin. He broke their school rushing record for a quarterback. However, he wouldn't do much in the NFL. With the New York Jets, he backed up Vinny Testaverde and Chad Pennington for 2 years. Then he joined the Vikings and backed up Travaris Jackson and Brad Johnson. And finally, he backed up Tony Romo in Dallas, which I find quite funny considering he was drafted before him. He finished his career with 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and 2,000 yards, which is not bad. I mean, considering he was a career 3rd string and 2nd string quarterback. And he's now a high school football coach in, I think, Minnesota. However, I cannot confirm. Alright, so with the 201st overall pick in the draft, the New England Patriots selected familiar face Cliff Kingsbury out of Texas Tech. Kingsbury played pretty good at Texas Tech. However, we know how air raid quarterback stats are inflated, and it really doesn't mean anything towards their real skill. He played 1 season for the Patriots, spending most of it on the injured reserve, and was waived in 2004. He then played for the Saints, Broncos, and Jets before retiring as a CFL player. He is most well known for being the former coach of Texas Tech, where he coached NFL MVP Patrick Mahomes, and the brand new coach of the Arizona Cardinals, where he'll be coaching Kyler Murray. Kingsbury has all the makings to be a great NFL coach. However, he was awful in the NFL. 17 yards and 0 touchdowns, and he was also injured quite a lot. It just really isn't good. With the 232nd pick in the 7th round, the Washington Redskins selected Gibran Hamdan out of Indiana. Hamdan would play in NFL Europe for 1 year and also played for the Redskins for a year before joining the Seahawks, 49ers, Seahawks again, Miami Dolphins, and Buffalo Bills. He then went to the CFL and played for the Toronto Argonauts before retiring. He now has his own fashion line. It's kind of funny. And yeah, he was pretty disappointing. He threw the ball like once in his career for 7 yards. The final quarterback selected in the 2003 draft was Ken Dorsey of my San Francisco 49ers. Dorsey would play a couple of games with both the Niners and the Browns before joining the CFL and then retiring in 2011. Dorsey then became the quarterback's coach for the Carolina Panthers, and he was their coach when they reached Super Bowl 50, and he probably had a part in Cam Newton's MVP season. He then left in 2018 to become the assistant director of athletics for the Florida International University's football program. This past offseason, on February 2nd, he became the quarterback's coach for the Buffalo Bills. Hopefully he'll do a good job with Josh Allen. In conclusion, 12 out of the 13 quarterbacks drafted before Tony Romo had nowhere near as much success as he did, and the only one that did was the number 1 overall pick. I find it really impressive that an undrafted player can have just as much success, if not better, which, in my opinion, he was better, than the number 1 overall pick in Carson Palmer. And it really shows you that hard work pays off. As I mentioned before, Romo is also a really good commentator, and he's gone viral for predicting plays before they happen, and you can really see that. His intelligence from when he played has paid off in the booth. Thank you for watching my video, and make sure to comment new ideas. Also make sure to subscribe so you'll see more of my videos.